Hello everyone, welcome to this session. Our chapter is compounds of metals. As for in our previous session, we discussed about the metal chlorides. So in this session, we'll move on to the other compounds of metals. Specifically, we'll be talking about the sulfates. So basically, in this session, we'll start discussing about the preparation of the soluble and the insoluble sulfates. So starting with the preparation of the soluble sulfates. Metal sulfates are generally soluble in water, except for the common non-insoluble sulfates of the lead and the barium sulfates are the ones that are insoluble sulfates. Now, calcium sulfate is sparingly soluble. That's the other uh, soluble sulfate. Now, the sulfate of alkali metals and those of the alkaline earth metals are very stable to heat. So that's just the obvious fact you have to get about these sulfates. Now, the preparation of the soluble sulfates. Now, soluble sulfates can be prepared in the laboratory by reacting the metals, oxides, hydroxides, or carbonates with this dilute sulfuric acid, and then isolating for the isolating these crystals. Now, the sulfates are isolated by the usual methods of the preparing soluble salts. For example, here are the kinds of the reaction. Iron plus this dilute sulfuric acid results to iron sulfate plus hydrogen gas, magnesium oxide plus this dilute sulfuric acid leads to magnesium sulfate plus water, sodium hydroxide plus sulfuric acid, sodium sulfate plus water, calcium carbonate plus sulfuric acid leads to this calcium sulfate plus water plus carbon dioxide gas. So that's how you can prepare these soluble sulfates, just simply by reacting the metals, oxides, their hydroxides, or the carbonates. As you can see, I've used these are just some of the examples we've used. For example, the metal here, then the oxide of the magnesium. Here we've used the hydroxide, and then we've used the carbonate. So that's how you can prepare these soluble sulfates. Now, let's see the preparation of insoluble sulfates. The best method to prepare insoluble metal sulfate is by the precipitation reactions. This is achieved by the reaction by reacting their soluble salts with this dilute sulfuric acid, as you can see in the reaction. For example, here barium chloride plus this dilute sulfuric acid results to barium sulfate plus the hydrogen chloride. Now, this the resulted barium sulfate. So this is the insoluble sulfate. Now the other example, as you can see, lead nitrate plus the dilute sulfuric acid leads to lead sulfate plus the nitric acid. Also, the sulfates are also isolated by the usual methods of the preparing insoluble salts. So you can simply tell the preparation of these insoluble sulfates plus also preparation of the soluble sulfates by just trying to observe also the preparation of these soluble and the insoluble salts. So they are mostly likely, they're almost the same in terms of their preparations. Now, let's see the chemical properties of the sulfates. Sulfates of all metals are just normal salts and they have the following properties. The first one that all sulfates give a white precipitate when treated with the aqueous salts of the lead and the barium. For example, as you can see the reactions. So that's the first chemical property. All sulfates, they just give this white precipitate. So you can tell the sulfates by this property, they just give a white precipitate when treated with the aqueous salts of lead and the barium. Moving on, barium and the lead sulfates are the only two common insoluble sulfates. So these are just the two common insoluble sulfates. While calcium sulfate is sparingly soluble, it means that it's just a little bit soluble. Then the rest of the sulfates are just soluble in water. So that's the chemical property of the chemical property of the sulfates by distinguishing them in terms of their solubility. Now, the surface of the metals in group 1 and group 2 of the periodic table are very stable to heat. The strong heating decomposes some of the surface of the heavier metals. So that's the other property. The other property of the chemical property of the sulfate, the sulfate disproportionate when heated, it means that it just gets away from its proportionality. As you can see, for example, as you heat this iron 2 sulfate, yes, it disproportionate itself. So that's the other property in terms of this iron 2 sulfate. Moving on, and 3 sulfate gives a good yield of sulfur trioxide gas, as you can see the reaction. Also, the other property, hydrated sulfates decomposes on heating just to form the oxides, the water, and the sulfur trioxide, as you can see the reactions. But hydrated sodium sulfate is just stable to heat. So that's the other factor about it. This the sodium sulfate that you have to know. It loses its water of crystallization when heated, as you can see the reaction, how it occurs. So that's all I have for this session. That's for everyone. We started discussing about the metal sulfates. We've seen how you can prepare the both of them, the soluble and the insoluble metal sulfates. And then we've seen these various chemical properties of these sulfates. So that's clear for this session. And thank you.